Jewish.
What is this sign here now? That's the Star of David. And what do you think's being said here in this picture here?
It's not like, yeah, it's not like he ate a lot. It looks like he lived like that, but he can't be like a real party. Because he didn't eat.
Okay, so you're saying in the beginning, what do you think's going on? I think the kids are being forced to work. What makes you think they might be being forced rather than actually having agreed to?
I mean, he probably wanted to do it, but I mean, I don't think that kid would really want to be making. I don't think that's the nicest job. Yeah. He'd probably have another job.
Rather go to school?
Yeah.
Now, the next one's really interesting. You said, I wonder if they're orphans. What made you say that?
It looks like they don't have a home. And also him. Kind of looks like he lives there, maybe. But I don't really know. But we just thought some of them looked a bit like they didn't have a place to go to live. I mean, like these ones, these five, they look like they had somewhere to go. But these three people, they looked a bit.
And what do you think you were basing that idea on? When you were looking at them, what is it that you can see about them that maybe thinks they have a home to go to?
They have clothes.
Yeah. Okay, well done. So let's have a look at this. You've talked about the background that you've seen, and the rubbish everywhere, child asking for something, the one lady on her own with her baby, wearing dirty clothes. And over here you said, I wonder if they are poor. I wonder if
There was a war.
If there's been a war. I wonder if that's why the walls have got broken. I wonder if he's a beggar because he has a small bucket. I wonder if that's her job, but she doesn't get much money. This is the little girl cleaning the rubbish. I wonder if it's because they don't have any food, but their tummies are swollen. Oh, and the children are crying.
Yeah, and in America they got too much.
Yeah, McDonald's, Burger King, pizza.
Right. Okay, you've done a really good job of looking at those pictures. I can see you've really tried to find an explanation for what's going on, and I really like the way that you used what you already know, things that you've already seen maybe on television or news reports. What we're going to do is you're going to come with your table and your photograph and come and sit up at the board, and we're going to see what conclusions we can draw about the pictures, and then you get a chance to look at each other's pictures as well. Hyunjin and Alex, can you tell us, quite simply, what was the big idea that you got from looking at these pictures? What were the things you were noticing and thinking might be going on? What were you seeing before you got to the idea of slavery? What was it you were actually seeing?
We saw that all of the children were working.
Yeah.
And we wondered if they were forced to work.
Okay, yeah. Because, and why were some of the reasons that you thought that maybe they were being forced to work?
Because, like, some of the jobs that the people had were like one of the ones at the very top in the middle.
Yeah.
There are two children, and they have bags on their back, and we thought they were maybe carrying garbage,
Yeah.
and they were being forced to do that.
So their faces were all serious.
They're concentrating. The one that
carrying the bricks.
carrying the bricks.
I don't know.
Drew?
I'm sure that they obviously don't want to work, and they would much rather go to school. So I wonder if they've been driven by the extreme poverty.
Yeah.
And maybe their parents are making them work.
Okay, great. Now look, everybody, you've all done a really good job on each of your different pictures, and we'll share the others. And the idea of this is that then we'll be able to look at the connections between these different photographs and what's going on in different children's lives, and be able to draw a big conclusion about the rights of the child.
I've used this routine several times during the year already. What I was delighted to see was that it was becoming easier for them to do it. They were not getting distracted and forming conclusions too quickly. They were really looking carefully. And I think that the routine, although it's getting at thinking, it's also a social skill. It also is developing that social interaction, that ability to listen to each other and to think about what somebody else is saying. And so the thinking that happens in the classroom becomes more exciting because they're starting to build explanations and pictures, and they help each other to understand the situation better.
So I'll go up there and change the slides back. But I'd like you to talk with the person next to you as we've been doing. You know, what struck you? What did you see? What did you notice? You know, we're not just looking at the lesson, we're trying to look at this culture, if you will. So what struck you, and then what elements from being part of a culture of thinking yourself did you see a version of there? Where was this teacher making what was going on inside those kids' heads? Where was she making that visible? Like, what value did it have? How did what was in their heads help to drive the learning? So have a little talk with each other while I get the slides back up. So friends, let's maybe start turning our conversation back to a whole group here. What kinds of things were people seeing and noticing? What was striking you? What came? You stepped in that classroom there for a moment.
Told about the routine. She named the routine, and they already knew that. So that's what happened. Create this culture. It wasn't something done just once and that's it. So this consistency, I think, helps.
So you were noticing something about that routine, that wasn't just that one time, one shot sort of notion, but they look closely, routinely. They develop theories, what we think might be going on there. They do that routinely, just normally, regularly. Somehow they got the memo. They got the message that they could do that. Yeah. What else was striking people? What came up for you? Yeah.
What caught my attention was how thoughtful she was by choosing those particular pictures and putting them together in a way so that kids could get to a conclusion afterwards that she wouldn't say. She would never give the proper answer, the right answer. There was no such thing. They would come up with conclusions by thinking out loud through the visible things, writing it down and talking to their colleagues. So it's co-created.
Yeah. So you notice a lot of that co-creation, that collaboration, something about those images too. You know, if I want kids to see and think and wonder, well then, if those images required no seeing, thinking, wondering, then they weren't random, right? There was something for them to look closely at and really look closely and develop some explanations or some theories and some wonderings from there. Something else. What else came up for you? Yeah, the gentleman here.
Just extend something about the pictures, because Gabi and I were talking, and apparently the pictures were different from groups to groups. So I think it becomes much more interesting in the end when different groups are presenting, because probably I'm going to listen to ideas from a different picture. Because I believe sometimes the students, they have, oh, you're going to talk about the picture I was looking at? I kind of know that. So I think it brings everyone together.
So you thought that there was a real opportunity for them to have a rich interaction individually and then collectively. And that's a culture of thinking, right? As opposed to listen to one another as an act of compliance. She also said, we're going to bring all these back together and we're going to look for connections across, right? She said that as well. But you noticed something about that interaction or potential for interaction. What else came up for you? Yeah. 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 She did name it, but she didn't say, and now we're going to do the See, Think, Wonder. She said, yesterday we were looking at the rights of the child, and we're going to look more closely into that. She announced purpose before she announced practice. We want to look closely. What do we see and what do we notice? And then what questions does this raise for us as we think about our topic, this rights of the child? She was really good about announcing first, and then she, that practice, rather than just saying, and now we're going to do these directions. It's subtle, but you noticed it, and it felt different. Actually, if we even go back to this list, You know, a culture of thinking. It's not just a lesson, it's a culture. We could be flexible and collective in our thinking. Different ones could bring strengths. We could bring, you know, there was an outcome we cared about, looking closely into these images. We could learn from our mistakes, lots of voices to be heard, right? Part of what that teacher was doing wasn't just a lesson, but she was trying to create a culture that invites these features. Students thinking, being visible, valued, actively promoted, not just lessons to be completed, right? Where do I want to go with this? Because we're almost coming up to our lunchtime. See, think, wonder, the activity. But she's just trying to do an activity there. She's trying to create a culture. What kind of thinking does she wish to make so routine that those kids routinely bring it? So she's not just looking for activities to decorate a lesson plan. She's got a wish list. You weren't in her classroom very long. I'm going to just play my facilitator's card only because of our time. But we've got all tomorrow and all the next day. So if I cut you off, then get in my face tomorrow. This lady's got a wish list. She's dreaming. I'm dreaming that kids will bring curiosity and wondering, that kids will bring close observation. I'm dreaming that kids will build theories and explanations, that kids will reason with evidence. Let's just say that's her wish list. That's not I'm going to do that in one lesson and then we all do it. She's going to work all school year to send the memo to those kids. This is my dream for you. So whatever my dream is, I want kids to listen to one another. I want them to consider perspectives. I want them to look closely. The question will always be for us in our project, how will the kids get in on the secret? How will the kids get in on the secret? How will the classroom story get communicated to them? You weren't in that classroom very long and you started paying attention to certain forces that were shaping that classroom culture. Like I said, if you've ever lived in a place that's different than where you grew up, you don't have to be in a new culture very long and you start to pick up the memo. This is what's important here. So where do you pick up the memo? Well, you got a sense that in that classroom, she's wanting those kids to do that, not just on a special occasion, but often. How did you pick up on that? That this must be what this teacher's dreaming of. Well, you notice she had routines and structures in place for them to be curious, to look closely, to reason with evidence, right? The routines that she put in place to help kids do those things. But it wasn't just the routine that shaped that culture. There was time. There was time for those kids to look closely. There was time for those kids to share ideas. There was time for those kids to say what makes them say that. How time gets invested will let everybody know this is what we dream of. You notice there were lots of opportunities for them to look closely. There were opportunities for them to be curious. There were opportunities for them to look closely and really look closely. The opportunities that we create will send messages. This is what we dream of. This colleague over here, she said, I noticed the teacher didn't even go in with the right, what's the right answer or something like that. You notice something like that, and you're using your air quotes. Hello, special bunnies. Part of the reason you noticed that had a lot to do with the opportunities. Imagine this. If she had sent them back to their desk, I've got these different images. Go back with your partner and try to guess which right of the child you have. Oh, you girls thought you had rights number 3? No, you had right number 6. Oh, you girls up here, you thought you had right number 2? Yes, you had right number 2. If the opportunity was go back and guess which one you have, there would be a right or a wrong. But she didn't ask them, guess which right you have. What do you see? What do you think could be going on there? What does that make you want? Oh, you think they might be being forced to work. No, that's not what you think. Do you hear how the opportunity didn't allow her to have that sort of interaction? Oh, you see their dirty faces? No, that's not what you see. She couldn't do that, right? The interaction she was having had a lot to do with the opportunity. Think about traditional schooling. The opportunity is often, did you get it right or didn't you get it right? Did you do the procedure that was in Mr. Church's head or didn't you? Right? Therefore, a lot of the ongoing interactions, a lot of the ongoing language does that. And the kids get the memo, oh, my job here is to absorb and regurgitate. But if Concept wants to be a school that we want kids to get the message that being curious, looking closely, making connections, reasoning with evidence, that's what we dream of for you, that's not a lesson, one-time lesson. That's a culture. So what routines do we have in place? Where do we allocate time for kids to do that? Where are the opportunities? That's why I know Priscilla's having you think a lot about planning. You have to plan for those opportunities. They're likely there, but if we can highlight it, we can certainly speak to it a lot. We can start to have interactions around that. We can start to model, right? See, think, wonder. It's a model. When new information comes your way, you could ask yourself, what do I see? What do I think here? What does that make me wonder? Right? See, think, wonder is something that 10-year-olds can do when they're looking there. See, think, wonder is what a 48-year-old can do when he's trying to understand what's happening in Venezuela. With this hyperinflation and people not having food, and I'm trying to understand that. It's not my life, but I care. What do I see? What do I think's going on there? What does that make me wonder? Do you see, think, wonder? It's not just an activity. It's a routine of thinking that I can bring to lots of places. You know? The opportunities, the time, the modeling, the routines. You noticed a lot about the language in that classroom. The teacher and her language. What makes you say that? What makes you say that? But also the kids. They start to take on that language as well. What, you think it's a boy. I think it could be a girl. Or what makes you say it's a girl? I think it's a boy. The kids took on the language that they heard. You notice the environment in that classroom? The environment, the space they had as a whole group, then individually and back to the whole group. The safety of the environment. Even what gets up on the walls will send messages. And here your ideas matter, or not, as the case could be. You also notice something about the expectations. This teacher had expectations for students, not just expectation to stay on task, and not just expectation to behave and to get the work done, but she had expectations for them to become close observers. She had the expectation for them to become reasoners with evidence. All of those cultural forces were working together to shape the story of this colleague's classroom. And the argument that I want to put out there for us as we then begin our journey together, those of you who are newcomers, tomorrow and the next day and then throughout the year. All of those cultural forces were sending messages to Lisa's kids, this is what matters. And all of those cultural forces are sending messages to kids at this school or on your campus, this is what matters. And sometimes people are like, oh, but we have so much to do. We've got PBL and we've got, state standards or, the government Ministry of Education standards, and we have this program, that program. We've got writers' works. Oh, we've got so much going on. I don't know if I want these in my classroom or not. If somebody says that to me, I think, I'm not so sure that's your choice to make because they're already there. Every classroom has language. Every classroom models something. Time. I don't know anybody that says, oh my gosh, I have so much time. Nobody says that, but with the time you do have, like every classroom has some time. So the choice isn't, do I want these in my classroom or not? The choice is, how conscious do I want to be? How intentional do I want to be? So that my choices around these send the memo. In here, I dream of you becoming a really good memorizer and regurgitator. Or in here, I dream of you becoming the kind of person who looks closely, develops theories, looks for connections, has empathy, considers perspectives, all those habits that we're thinking of, these thinking moves. And this is where I'm going to just start to get us towards our lunch. The tension we face in this profession is when I want one thing and the culture tells the kids another story. I know a lot of teachers that will say, oh, I wish kids would bring curiosity to their learning. But there's no time for curiosity. There's no language of curiosity. There's no routines for curiosity. Yep, we're good. Yep. She wants to know if I'm finishing. I'm wanting to know if she's finishing. Yeah, we're about ready now. Yep. Okay. Good deal. We're both watching each other, and so here really is the last thing is I say I want curiosity, but there's no time, there's no language, there's no opportunities for it. So the kids soon know, oh, Mr. Church says he wants curiosity, but he doesn't really mean that. That's the challenge we face. Or I know a lot of teachers that say, oh, don't be afraid to make mistakes. We can learn from our mistakes. Actually, if you try something and it doesn't work out, you can't get the top mark on the rubric. You can't get the top grade if you make a mistake. So basically I say, I want you to learn from your mistakes. No, I don't. This is the challenge. This is the challenge. So in this project, a culture of thinking is, how do we really think? What shapes the culture? That's more than just the ambiance. That's more than just the feeling of the place. But what's the language we use? What's the opportunities we create? What do we model? What interactions do we have? And that's so much more than just planning lessons. Do you see what I'm saying there? So it's time for us to break for lunch. In our time, tomorrow and the next day, we'll be always looking at all of those cultural forces, but we're really going to hone in on that idea of routines. A lot of the folks up there in the balcony, they've got a lot of routines under their belt. Some of you, if you've come from St. Paul's, I know you've been using routines, but I hope this helps to kind of leverage some of the things that you were experiencing there as you come into this place. Some of you, routines might be very, very new. And so we're just going to really get into that space the next couple of days. So it's really nice to meet you. Honestly, you've got great colleagues up there in the balcony, so I hope you can live up to being just as great because they're pretty fun. But are you guys going to be fun ones too? I mean, I learned samba from them last year, so okay. So, a competition, the newcomers, what can you teach me? Okay, so anyway, thank you for your time and enjoy your lunch. See you. Yeah.